Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the second Building Inclusivity Roundtable hosted by ACE. We have a fantastic panel here with us today, lots of smiley faces. We've got a lot to share with you. So we will highlight things around the power of neurodiversity. We will look at the insights that have been learned along personal journeys. And also we've got experts in our panel that look to create that more inclusive environment. So we've got quite a wide variety of panelists today. We also welcome questions throughout. So please use the chat function if you have a question. We have an hour for today's session, and with such a topic, we know that we could talk almost all day on this topic with being so wide. So we have an hour. We'll do our best to go through lots of useful information and answer any questions that come in. Should we have lots of questions and run out of time, or the questions maybe be a bit more of a sensitive nature, we'll take them offline and ensure that the most appropriate panelist gets involved in a response, and we will make sure we come back to you. So myself and Chetna, who's working in the background at AC, will ensure we capture all of the questions from today. I think also the best thing to do is jump straight in and do some introductions. So I would like to introduce the panel to you. I'll hand over initially to Laurel and Gabriel from Aspirations, if you'd like to share what you do, who you are, and maybe why you're here on our panel today, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
So I'm Laurel Herman. I'm founder of Aspirations, and we were set up specifically to help autistic talent, high-performing autistic talent, to gain meaningful, rewarding, appropriate working lives denied to many too many. And this has gone on for many years, so we have a lot of work to do. Okay, Gabriel?
That was quicker than normal. I'm Gabriel. I'm the chair of Aspirations. I should point out that we are a social enterprise and that we work on both sides, with the autistic community in the main looking for employment. They are the autistic community is the least likely to be employed of all disabled communities in the UK. So we do have our hands. We are very busy on that. But we also work with business as well to try to transform them into autism-friendly organisations.
Super, thank you. Sharon?
Hi, I'm Sharon Slinger from Constructing Rainbows. I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant focused on the built environment. My work around neurodiversity, I am neurotypical myself, so I draw on the lived experiences of others to help organisations, improve their processes and working environments for the neurodiverse population.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Bettison and I'm a transport consultant at AECOM. I'm dyslexic myself, so I thought I'd come on here and sort of share some of my experiences in the working world and some of the changes that I've made at AECOM as well. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Richard, can we come to you next?
Good morning, afternoon. I'm Richard Woods. I'm a senior HR manager at Hoare Lea and a member of the AC HR Forum. I am, like many, neurodiverse. I have dyslexia and dyscalculia, and I do my best to sort of build awareness and promote all the good things that we can do. Brilliant,
thank you. Tony?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony McCaffery. My pronouns are he and they. I'm the founder and consulting director of Diversity Scotland, which is a leading global diversity, equity and inclusion consulting practice. I'm really delighted to be here today. As someone with neurodivergence myself, this is really important to me, but also to the work that we do with organisations across the world.
Super, thank you. And across on my screen to Gillian, welcome.
Thank you. So I'll just describe myself for those listening. I'm a 54-year-old white female with long brown hair. I have olive skin. Thank you for my Dutch Malaysian grandmother. My pronouns are she and her. By profession, I'm a chartered architect, but I often say if I wasn't an architect, I'd be a psychologist. My values are compassion, caring, and curiosity, and I have a lived experience of being neurodegenerative. In 2019, I started research around inclusive environments, and then I've set up a company called Strawberry Leopard Limited, which is to enable everyone to reach their full potential.
Super, thank you. Wow, I mean, it's going to be an interesting hour, and like I said before, I think we could talk for a long time with such great experiences and valuable insights that you're going to share today. I think one of the things that some of us struggle with is, you know, what does neurodiversity actually mean? And I think this is a great place to kick this roundtable off. And you know, maybe we could start with yourself, Laurel, and come across to Gillian afterwards to really bring what does that mean to us. Oh, Laurel, just need to...
Yeah, neurodiversity is the hot topic for 2022. Everyone's heard of it, but we're finding that so many people don't really understand it. There's a massive confusion. And what we're trying to do, obviously, is raise the interest, the awareness, the understanding, but also bust some of the myths which are out there. So for us, neurodiversity describes those who think differently to neurotypicals, which is the rest of us, including myself. And it was originally coined by the autism community to positively differentiate themselves. But today it's an umbrella term, which now includes those with ADHD, ADD, Tourette's, dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and autism. And now Gillian has told me it's degenerative as well, which I'm afraid I didn't know. But these conditions can overlap in any one individual, which makes it confusing. And the way it affects them can also differ and be of varying degrees. So that's why I think a lot of people don't really understand it. And there's all these kind of misunderstandings around. At Aspirations, we are actually experts in autism itself, a spectrum. And shockingly, at the last count, only 16% of all diagnosed are in any kind of work. And meanwhile, this includes many able, talented individuals above average intelligence. It's a travesty. We found there are two main factors influencing the lack of employment. There's flawed employment and progression processes. It's not a level playing field at all, meaning that large numbers of highly qualified, bright, able individuals never attain roles appropriate to their abilities or qualifications. We shockingly hear of them being in a post room or goodness knows what, when it's totally inappropriate. But others, fearful of being stigmatized and often with an invisible difference, choose not to disclose, sometimes not even wanting to get the diagnosis. They work over hard to mask their condition, but therefore induce extra anxiety and are not able to give their best, to the detriment of themselves and their employer. Regrettably, unfortunate consequences also often result over time due to others being unaware there are legitimate reasons for unusual behaviour, and then it's a slippery spiral downwards. There's a known correlation to extreme anxiety, breakdown, drink and drug abuse, and suicide. So we all need to do everything we can to avoid this. Meanwhile, what we are doing is helping autistic talent to, as I said, meaningful, rewarding, appropriate employment. And to do so, we actually offer a range of services to help organizations to be what we call autism fit and friendly. Then we called it ASD fit and friendly. Now we call it neurodiverse fit and friendly. And what it means, we help them to attract and to employ and retain talent and gain a competitive advantage. We make them aware, understanding, accommodating, and welcoming. That's really what we're talking about here, true inclusivity. And autistic talent brings some particular traits that provide an advantage: strong problem-solving skills, excellent attention to detail, highly technical skills, outstanding rote memory, very intense focus, and distinctive logical and analytical abilities, plus, of course, typical character qualities: reliability, dedication, determination. And at this time of disruption, transformation, and innovation, their different way of thinking contributes greatly to a business's growth and success and to mutual benefit. So that's why we do what we do, and we're all trying very hard to make it an inclusive, welcoming, belonging business world.
Thank you, Laura. That is, yeah, exactly why we're here, building inclusivity, making it a nice place, great place, and friendly place to work. Gillian, I wondered if you wanted to build on that, seeing as you brought another aspect into the call earlier on today. Or I just need to do your mute button if that's okay. Thank you.
Of course, yeah, certainly. So yeah, as Laurel said, 1 in 7 essentially is sort of the figure out there that people talk about being neurodiverse, brain different. And what people don't realise is our brains are actually as unique as our fingerprints, similar to our fingerprints. So we're all sort of unique. There are different sort of profiles. So you get the neurotypical, which is the majority, estimated to be up to 80%. But I don't think anyone's typical. I think we're all somewhere on the spectrum. I think you get neurodivergent, which is the examples that Laurel gave around autism, ADHD, dyslexia. And Tony, I know you added some others around synesthesia, obsessive compulsiveness, and Mears-Irene syndrome, etc. And then there's where I sit, which is the neurodegenerative, which is sensory processing differences that have developed over time. Many people haven't had their profile formally assessed or don't fall tidily into one group. Some have different sensory processing sensitivities and traits, and that relates back to the built environment. And there's really a wide spectrum of how people are affected. They can also be affected on a regular basis and an intermittent basis. So just building on my lived experience, in 2019, I had 2 strokes, one of which was actually in the office, and I was diagnosed with an incurable brain tumour. This has left me with symptoms and experiences of people with invisible disabilities, such as dizziness. My vestibular sense is completely off. I walk into walls and corners all the time just because of my sense of balance. We don't necessarily think about all the senses. And I think the one experience that really made me realise that we need to think about environments differently when we're designing them was I'd gone into an office, as you do. I was going into a building for a meeting. So go up to the reception area. I was desperate for the toilet, to sort of check my makeup and freshen up before my meeting. And I navigated myself to the toilet. And as I went to turn around and come out, there was about 3 or 4 doors. There was no wayfinding or signage in the other direction. I started to have a panic attack that I would have another stroke or a seizure in that space and no one would find me. And so just even as a simple thing, wayfinding back to landmarks or better navigation is something I started to think about. From that, I then started to do research with individuals, finding out that either sort of resonate or are neurodiverse, finding out what they need in environments. So started Inclusive Environments and Strawberry Leopard from them. But it was really that lived experience that made me realise that we need to think about things differently, and we need to think about invisible disabilities as well as visible disabilities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you very much for sharing your personal story. We do appreciate it. I know on the panel, you've and in your introductions, some of you have shared that you have got other lived experiences. And I wonder if we could come to you, Gabriel, to share some of your experience today in the workplace and our built environment that you're living in.
Well, what I would first of all say and very much stress is it sounds like a huge, huge problem for everybody. And it isn't, because what we need to do is take a step back and see things in a different way and think actually these differences can be accommodated very, very easily. And actually there are shared problems even with the neurodiverse, the neurotypical, the normative thinkers as well. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Obviously, we're talking to a lot of people within the autistic community who are very, very often hidden to society because they can't articulate some of the problems that they're facing, because quite frankly, they're embarrassed because they see everybody else coping so well. So here's a real example from university life. Okay, we know of a student, a very bright student, who actually can't go to some lectures. And when I started to ask, well, why? The reason was the way that the building was built. So, for example, if you can imagine a lecture hall with an auditorium style audience where you can rake seating, all facing the lecturer. If the door is in the stage area rather than the back of the room, it's extremely intimidating to walk towards the audience of faces, particularly if you're autistic and socially impaired. So And also, of course, if the door doesn't actually have a window, you can't actually see what you're going to face when you open the door. Again, socially very, very difficult. And so as a result of those problems, that student actually couldn't go into that lecture hall at the best of times. So we've got to be very mindful, I think, not only about how we build buildings, but actually how they are used by people. And I think that it would be very informative to the industry if they asked autistic people what some of the things that are concerning them, because we'll find out that they concern quite a few people more. One other thing is that we were talking earlier about sensory issues. I was at a hotel, and I kind of acclimatized myself to a hotel environment, so I can sit in a lounge without any problem. But the people I was with, suddenly I said to them, "Have you noticed something?" And they said, "No." I said that the light is flickering. And what I picked up was the frequency of the light of the light bulb was slightly slower, and it was actually flickering, but nobody else was spotting it. So that's a sensory issue that we might not be aware of, but I think that we need to increasingly be thinking about. So those are some of the experiences. I can give you others, but they're just two examples.
Gabriel, just on that, what I've also heard from people with different sensory processing needs is not only just seeing the flickering of the light, but with fluorescent lights, they can hear the fluorescent lights as well. There's lots of ways with the sort of hypo and hyposensitivities that people experience these spaces, and completely agree with you around sort of reaching out and listening to as many individuals as possible. I mean, this is where I think some of these ERGs and affinity groups that are coming into organisations are a good start to understand how people are using those spaces.
Yeah.
I don't want to hog the time, but we might be able to come back later and explain why I think personally that autism is a special case, in so much as the communication between autistic community and the neurotypical community is not great. And I think there's something getting in the way, and we can talk about why we can't learn from each other at this present moment, and we need a little bit more, we need the skills to work out how to do that.
Yeah, and the other, just one thing to remember is once you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. It presents itself completely differently with different individuals.
But we mustn't take that too literally. There are certain common traits as well.
Yeah, I'm just going sort of, I guess, back on your point, Gillian. I think it's a nice connection with Rebecca, because Rebecca, I know you're more than happy to share your experience, and you've kindly written a blog for us on our website, so thank you again for that. But it ties really nicely into what Gillian's saying around just listening to people and what they've got to say on the topic as the expert. So I don't know, is this a good point for you to share your story?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think especially when we were just talking about the lighting and the sounds, even being dyslexic, I find that really difficult. Sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. So I've also got Erling syndrome as well, which I haven't put in the blog, but sometimes I have to wear my glasses, and it looks like as if I've got my sunglasses on, but for reading and concentrating, especially in like an office environment where the lights are really bright, it can be quite tricky. But then of course now we're sort of falling into the hybrid sort of remit where, you know, a lot of people are working either from home, they've set up their own environment that helps them, and then also going back into the office and sort of managing that sort of difference in time and things. So what I sort of set up was a little sort of support group, shall I say, just informal sort of private sort of Teams chat, but basically just a place where other neurodivergent people can just sort of add in their experiences, share resources and things like that, just to help each other, because sometimes it can be feeling a bit lonely. Because I think what we were also talking about is, not everybody feels comfortable to go, oh yeah, I'm dyslexic, or yeah, you know, and just explain that. And I think what I also do is, well, my emails, especially with hybrid working and working with loads of people, it's sometimes nice, I find, just putting on my signature that, like, you know, expect a few typos, but the ideas are there, you know, so don't, you know, really critique, but, you know, at least the content's there. And I think getting that sort of message across, even whether you're in the office or working from home, so it's not always physically, but yeah, making sure that people actually recognise it, really.
Rebecca, for the benefit of people on the call, could you perhaps give a little bit of a description of what Ms. Erlen is?
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so basically it sort of falls into my dyslexia. I think we were talking about how things sort of merge, you know, you've got these sort of different traits, so hence why everybody is individual, even though they could be, you know, all fall into this group. But so basically for me, all the words, I never realized, I read a book and I was like, you know, these words, I'm having to use a ruler to follow the words, because the words were moving around and I literally couldn't, I could read the whole paragraph backwards. I'm like, but they're moving. Like, how do you catch these letters and these words? And then it was only until I got a diagnosis, I was like, oh, you can use colours. These colours work, and it really reduces that sort of the jumping around of the letters and the words. And yeah, it's a lot easier, and it reduces the stress. It's a bit of a visual eye stress as well. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite a small step forward, isn't it, in terms of putting something on your signature. It's not costing the business a lot of money to make an adaptation, and having a group that's okay informal at present, but no doubt will grow quite large in terms of people wanting to share their experience. Laurel, did you want to come in?
Yes, just to say that when people hear about reasonable adjustments, they think about major things, and so many of these are teeny weeny. And this is the issue, that we need to get this over, that we're not talking about major effort here. It's the interest and the desire that's important. That's where we are. Yeah. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think it's a good time to maybe bring in Sharon and Richard, because in your roles, you know, you're working with businesses and with people that are experiencing some of these challenges in the workplace. So maybe you could share with us, you know, the effect it has on the business and what they can do, what they can't do.
Yeah, do you want me to start, Richard? Yeah. And so yeah, it's just as Laurel's just said, it's about an interest and an understanding. I think there's a real lack of understanding around neurodiversity in the workplace, and sessions like this are really great for starting to prompt that interest. But as soon as people start to understand and start to listen to the neurodivergent people in their businesses, and someone mentioned ERGs and affinity networks, they're brilliant, and I've been working with some of my clients who have got affinity networks focused on that. They start to understand that actually the world and the workplace is set up for neurotypical people, and actually we need to be looking at how we can make those environments and those working practices work for everybody. And some of that is actually just realizing that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to these things, and actually just talking to your staff and to your employees and your team members about what works for them. You know, we went through this brilliant idea of kind of open plan offices, you know, great for creativity and all that, but actually for many neurodivergent people, they're awful, and actually they want kind of a quieter space within the office where they can concentrate more. So again, I think for me the key is listening to people and then acting on these small changes that we can make. And also, you know, considering your recruitment processes, you know, are they excluding people because we usually just do CV, interview, job. Actually, that doesn't always work for people, and it doesn't get the best out of people. So, you know, let's look at the different ways that we can operate.
Yeah. Can I just ask, Sharon, you mentioned an acronym that I'm not sure everyone would know. Did it ERG? Was it E? Yeah, the employee resource group. So it's another word kind of for affinity networks. So, you know, where organizations might have kind of, we talked about LGBT last time, they might have an LGBT network, they might have a disability network. Some have got neurodiversity specific networks set up in their organizations. Brilliant, thank you. Richard?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Sharon. Some really good points there. I feel myself as obviously there is still stigma, and I think in the workplace it can be a very intimidating environment to sort of be open and honest about a condition such as neurodivergence. I think just touching on what someone else said as well, like you can make really small changes, but I think having the confidence to propose something, or the right environment to have maybe even like a manager or something that will look for supporting change, I think can be quite challenging. So there's loads of tools out there, there's loads of things that you can do to put in place which will make a huge difference for someone, even though it's a very small impact on the business. And, you know, the benefit of that on the individual and the business is massive. You know, effectively enabling performance and confidence. So there's just huge potential, and I guess same as everyone on the call, the more we can do to build the awareness, build an inclusive environment, to get more people sort of talking about it and sort of realizing that potential, the better.
I think it's almost like previously we've designed just talking to these people. And actually, if we think about people on the sort of upper end of the spectrum, or if you look at spiky profiles and taking some of their viewpoints, actually you're going to be designing better for everybody. And it won't be around specific accommodations and adaptations, which are difficult enough to ask for anyway. Let's try to make the environment more inclusive for everyone in the space. And the other thing I just wanted to bring up around talking to people and showing, I don't know if anyone on the call, but since I've started wearing a sunflower lanyard for invisible disabilities, I've noticed a lot more people wearing the lanyard as well, and able to sort of have that conversation. And it's just, so for people that don't know, this is a scheme that was started in the airports. It was actually Gatwick Airport. And it's a sort of a lanyard that you can sort of wear that almost says, you know, I have an invisible disability, I just need a little bit more time, or be a little bit more patient with me. And we've also rolled that out through some organisations and offices as well. So aggregate industries, as a big construction industry, they now have that within their environment, and they've found that with sort of listening circles and the sunflower lanyards, people are much more open around what they need and coming forward. As Richard said, you know, there's this stigma, but if we can break down some of that stigma, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Sharon?
Yeah, can I just add, we're also, you know, we're built environment professionals. We're in a really unique position to make these changes to the built environment that affects everybody every day, and actually to make sure that people's lived experiences are going into the designs of the stuff that we're doing. We need people, you know, neurodivergent and neurodegenerative people within our, you know, within our roles, within our workplaces to help with that design. And so the more that we can do to support that in the recruitment process and in our workplaces, the better it is for the whole built environment and for the whole of society.
Thank you. Tony, you've been waiting really patiently, and it's a nice segue, because what I know when we've had many discussions is your passion for driving this through recruitment, driving, you know, getting the right talent in the right jobs. So I would love to hear more around your thoughts on that. And I think it's building on some of the points that have already been mentioned. It's quite tough out there, isn't it?
It is, and I think, thank you. I think it's important to actually first of all understand the scale of neurodiversity in the population. So first of all, you know, for me personally, I distinguish my neurodivergence very separately from my disabilities. So I also have multiple disabilities as well. And I guess, you know, to pick up on Laurel's early point, you know, the whole concept of neurodiversity sort of stemmed out of the social model of disability, in terms of understanding that it's not necessarily a disabling factor, and that it's just something that, you know, I love Gillian's term about brain different, but, you know, 90% of disabilities are invisible, and for many people actually all the different forms of neurodivergence are invisible too. I mean, I can only speak to statistics in Scotland, but I think they're broadly the same in the rest of the UK. You know, so where we're looking at research in Scotland shows that roughly 2% of people have autism, 8% of people have ADHD, although actually a recent study showed that from ADHD aware that figure might be closer to 30 to 40% of people in Scotland have ADHD. 10% of people are dyslexic, 1 to 2% of people have Tourette syndrome, 5% of people have an acquired brain injury, 20% of people who have some form of neurodivergence also have mental health needs, 8% of people are dyspraxic. So when you actually look at that, you're looking at well over 15% of the available workforce in Scotland. And actually, if you take those figures from ADHD aware, it's significantly higher than that. So if you're thinking about those types of figures in the workforce, it just goes to show how important it is. And from a recruitment perspective, the work that Diversity Scotland does, along with other organisations like Skills Development Scotland, very much focuses on helping to identify, to Gabriel's point, some of the commonalities that exist for people who fall under that neurodiversity umbrella, some of the common challenges that are there, but also understanding what some of the common strengths are, and using that knowledge to job match effectively. You know, so if you take people with dyslexia, you know, so despite being 10% of the population, 22% of dyslexics are unemployed. You know, some of the common challenges there are things like memory, organization, writing, reading, time management. But actually, a lot of the common strengths are things like creativity, design, communication, being able to see the big picture. So those tend to then lean into roles like graphic design roles, entrepreneurial positions, journalists, sales managers, web developers, things where you're able to utilize those common strengths and not fall into some of the challenges that might come along with your neurodiverse situation of being dyslexic. I mean, I could talk about this for the whole session, Claire, but I won't. But I do have, I guess, some really common things that I would suggest that people look out for, and that is about ensuring you create neurodivergent inclusive recruitment practices. Everything from ensuring that your job description and your job design piece is done effectively. And it's so important, and I cannot stress this enough, that when you're designing inclusive recruitment processes, this should be designed by people and with people with lived experience of neurodivergence. I have a real issue with seeing recruitment processes designed and led by people who don't have lived experience of neurodivergence. I often find that the language is wrong. I find that sometimes there's very patronising and condescending approaches towards people. So job descriptions, looking at essential criteria, job adverts, it's really important to get the language right. It's really important to have flexible application processes. I think it was Sharon that said about, you know, CV, interview, you know, job offer. That's not going to cut it for many neurodivergent people. Absolutely reasonable adjustments are crucial and should be happening, not just for people who have disabilities, not just for people who are neurodivergent, but we should, as employers, be ensuring that we're offering and encouraging people to come forward to discuss reasonable adjustments that they have for any element of their life, whether it's caring responsibilities, any of that kind of thing. Assessment and selection processes should be very flexible, and you should carefully consider the use of any tests that are done, because sometimes they have a significant adverse impact for people with a whole range of different neurodivergences. And then, very importantly, regardless of the outcome, whether it's a successful outcome or an unsuccessful outcome for a candidate, post-interview feedback is crucial, because that is something that will really help build the confidence and the awareness, not only of the employer, but of the candidate, and help to ensure that future recruitment processes can be as inclusive as possible. You're on mute, Claire.
You'd think you'd learn, wouldn't you? But yeah, great points there. And again, very practical, you know, the things that we can do, take away and start looking at tomorrow. And I see, Richard, you would want to come in on some of those points.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, Tony. Thank you. I think I just wanted to add sort of like an example I saw a few years ago now on sort of, I read an article on LinkedIn, and it supports basically that whole business valuing neurodiverse sort of ways of thinking. And it was GCHQ, so National Intelligence Agency, and they actively looked to recruit neurodiverse people, basically understanding the benefits of what people can bring to the roles that they need. So analysts and sort of people that can really get into the detail of problem solving and creative thinking. And it's just, you know, even in our industry, there's a number of different sort of roles out there which require people to think different, and I think that's why having that piece of awareness from a business perspective is valuable. Also being confident and building awareness on the ground, you know, for people to harness their skills and understand them better, all the way through the recruitment process for me. So I just wanted to make that point to support Tony really.
No, thank you, Richard. Gabriel, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to what Gillian said, and I think Tony was referring to it. But Gillian said spiky profiles, and again, some members of the audience might not be aware of what we're talking about. What we're saying, particularly with the autistic community, which is something I know about, is that a lot of autistic individuals will have very heightened skills in the workplace in one area, but very poor skills in others. And what we kind of say is, what is the blooming point of getting them, forcing them to become generalists, build a team around them and let them thrive and do something very special in the skills that they have. So I just wanted to make that point. And also, Claire, I hope you won't mind me saying that people can actually ask their questions in the audience, in the chat room, because it'd be great to have some questions from the audience.
Yep, no problem at all. Laurel, would you like to come in as well?
Am I on mute?
No, you're good. We can hear you.
Okay. Well, I always get confused with unmute and mute. Just to say that, I mean, a lot of the talk has been about what could be done and what should be done. And just to make it very clear, at Aspirations, what we do is audit some of these things for companies so that they don't have to change. There might be many things we're saying, this is fine with a little teeny adjustment. Or look, for example, with interview skills, we do a whole audit of recruitment process, as Tony has said, from beginning to end. And we had the most incredible story of what some company, a leading law firm, was actually doing in the interview, which they thought was really an icebreaker helping everyone. In fact, it was creating extreme anxiety. It was something like asking an autistic individual, what would your 3 best friends say if we asked them about you? Now, first of all, the person thought, why are they asking me about my friends? What have I got 3 best friends? What is a best friend? Why would you ask the best friend? And by this time, she had gone into a terrible state of anxiety and obviously lost the interview. When we asked them why they said that, it's an icebreaker. Icebreaker, it was absolutely a breaker. And this is what I mean, people do things with good intentions.
Yeah.
So part of our work is involved, we have several autistic individuals within our work who actually look at it from different points, as well as dyspraxia and dyslexia. So with everything we do, we have their input on it. So we do the audits of the culture, of the environment, of the interviews, etc., the recruitment process, but we also do a lot of training, because a lot of this is for people to bring whatever issues they may have, whether they are the people who are neurodivergent or not, but the other people to bring to the table any issues and then discussing them and finding ways to mitigate them. So it's really valuable to do that. That's what we do.
It's great to hear that, Lauren. It really is great to hear that, and certainly, you know, when you're auditing an organization for you know, looking at their culture, looking at the recruitment processes, you know, looking at neurodiversity should be a key aspect of that. But remembering how those things are integrated and considering the intersectional considerations that there will be across ethnicity and gender and wider disability and a whole host of things is really important. So I would certainly be advocating to organisations that are going to invest time in considering, you know, employing more neurodivergent people, that if they're going to look at audits on that kind of thing, that they really do focus on the entire gamut of inclusivity, and be careful not to spend too much resource looking at something in a very siloed manner, because they may miss an opportunity from an intersectional perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're back to the building inclusivity being everybody. Actually, we're just honing in on different communities and networks to raise awareness. But yeah, you're right, Tony, it's such a large topic. Rebecca, you patiently got your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of share my experience in terms of like the recruitment process, because you know, you go through, you do all your education, oh excellent, you know, you've worked really hard, you know, sweat, tears and everything's gone into it, you know, and then you get, oh yeah, so you know, you've completed as a graduate, oh excellent, going into the real world, and then yeah, you sort of go, oh, you want me to do another test? Like, what is this test? Like, is my qualifications not enough, you know? And it's that, like, and again, oh no, what, you know, what's this test going to be about? Is it, I don't know, weird pictures where you have to like decide if they're rotated backwards, you know, flipped upside down, and it gets very, you just, I still can't answer them now, but you know, it's not stopped me from doing the role, because that's not something I'm going to do in my role, you know. It's so totally different. And I think because I did a placement year before joining AECOM, well, at AECOM, but yeah, before joining as a graduate, I'd done an actual sort of placement year. So it was an excellent opportunity to show my skills in the real world. You know, do I fit into the team? Am I the right person for the job? So basically a year-long interview, you know, but it's a really good way of just sharing it rather than these sort of tests that are totally irrelevant, really, you know, and it puts you off the stress and everything else that goes with it. So I think it's good just to get some experience out there. But
thank you, thanks for sharing. Gillian, did you pop your hand up as well?
I did, yeah. So it was really, not just about attracting people, but also retaining and motivating them. So just a couple of quick stories around that. So I was interviewing someone recently, and they'd said that when they went to their interview, they'd told HR that they had this ADHD, but that information hadn't gone through to their manager. So after about sort of 6 months of working with the manager thought that this just isn't working. I'm going to have to sit down and talk to this person. And it turned out that it was a time management issue. So the person was given all these tasks to do. They weren't actually told which tasks to prioritize, how long a task should take. And so they were spending too long on it, and it just wasn't working. So they agreed between them that actually they should give tasks in sort of 45-minute chunks. And now that person is their best worker. So not just from the interview stage, but it's also through the whole life cycle of someone being in the business. And then the other example I had was from somebody that actually had to leave, and unfortunately will never probably go back into work again because of their experience. They went to work for a fast food chain who said they were very inclusive. This person went in, but the shift that they gave them was the 4 o'clock shift, and it was when the schools were coming out. And they were just, people would just take the mickey at them, sort of, you mentioned before, Richard, about the, stigmatisms around it. And that person just couldn't cope with what they were having to put up with within their work. They ended up leaving, even after asking their managers, as I said, if they could change, and they were told no. And now they won't ever go into work again. And it's these statistics that, Laurel, you said from the beginning, we really need to change and be more mindful of.
Yeah, absolutely. We spend as an organisation such a lot of time, effort, money, resources in seeking out the right candidates. There's a need for that candidate. It's often the most expensive resource that we have. We need to look after them and ask those questions. Comes back to what we were saying throughout, isn't it? Speak to the people who are in those positions, because they probably have got some of the solutions for you. I wonder, Sharon, if I could come to you. You mentioned earlier on that you're engineer by heart, and we touched on us being in this unique position within the built environment to make a difference. I didn't know if there's anything else you wanted to build on that. I know previously we've had discussions about some legislation coming in and different ways of working. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that particular point?
Yeah, I know there are groups of people that are currently working on different legislation. I know IWFM, for one, have released something on inclusive work environments. I think there's a PAS come out or coming out on that. So it's probably worth us putting some of those links into the chat whilst we're here, if we can. I'll send in them afterwards. Because it's just to getting people to really start to think more broadly about the things we touched on earlier, such as lighting. There's some big lighting schemes going on to get LEDs in, to save money, to help save the environment. But actually, if it's not working for everybody, we need to just take a pause and see what we can do. So I think it's really, Gillian's just anyway, just put that in the link. So I think the industry is starting to look at it, but I think we need to know that those documents and those guidance documents are out there, and we can start integrating them in our designs. One thing I was thinking about, it was something that Gabriel said about building up teams around you to backfill your kind of your weaknesses so you can focus on your strength areas. One thing we don't particularly have in the built environment is some really visible role models and senior leadership talking about neurodiversity and how they've put in coping mechanisms, put in teams around them that help them to focus on their strength areas. This must be happening out there. I'm sure it is, but we're not seeing that. And so people, who are neurodivergent can't see that actually, you know, I can get to the top. I just need that extra support, a little bit of extra support around it, so that I can focus on those strength areas. So I think it would be great if we could kind of, you know, if we have senior leaders on this call or whatever who are neurodivergent, you know, just have a think about whether it is something that you want to do, start talking about it a bit more. I know we've got, you know, like Rebecca and Richard on here who are from the industry and are starting to talk about it, but let's see those senior leaders do it as well.
Yeah, sure. Richard, did you want to come up on that point?
Yeah, I just again want to say I agree with what Sharon's saying there. So it's really interesting the sort of numbers I think Tony touched on earlier around how many people do have neurodiverse conditions, and actually it's a lot higher than we probably think. There's the awareness piece and there's the confidence to come out and say, you know, what there is, but there's a lot more people that since I've started to sort of even promote sort of internally and externally about building awareness that have come to me and said, actually, I'm neurodivergent, and including leaders. And I think it's a really important part in the whole process that we're talking about, where people can aspire and look up to that. Because it, you know, there's no ceiling on someone with neurodiversity. So actually having more success stories, having someone to look up to and say, okay, yeah, this was my experience and this is how I've managed to navigate sort of my challenges and limitations, and these are the strengths I use in order to do that. Hugely important for me. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Good point, Richard. Gabriel, did you want to come in, or was there a legacy hand? Oh, legacy hand.
No, I do. Tony will come now, I'm sure. I wanted to go back to what I said earlier, that of the crisis specifically faced by the autistic community, because I said of all the disabled communities in the UK, they're the least likely to be employed. And I would suggest it's probably the best therapy, probably one of the only therapies to autistic individuals, because autism is really about a social impairment, not being able to socialize equally within society. And by being in the workforce and being in the office, there is a certain amount of socialization as a result. So I think that we've really got to work out what's going on. And I think uniquely, it's a communication problem with this particular community and neurotypicals in the workplace, which is getting in the way. And I think that if we start to explore what's going on, I think that we might be able to understand what the autistic community actually is requiring. The thing is that the autistic community very rarely can articulate what it actually wants as individuals. But even within the community itself, it's not really a community, because we made the point earlier that if you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism. The social impairment on top of that, we're not talking to each other really. And so we've got to work out that commonality that's going on. And I think that what it's all about is the fact that an autistic individual, when they are writing a CV, don't know who they're writing that CV to, so they need help. But that help requires experts to take about an hour each time within each individual, and we don't have enough experts to do that work. Now, the CV will not usually have a good career history because of the reason I just said, that they're highly likely to be unemployed. And therefore, the comparative CV will go to somebody who's got a career history rather than one who doesn't. So then we have to do a personal statement to explain why the CV looks the way it does. And that requires learning about transferable skills. Autistic people in the main are very intelligent. They understand the term transferable skills, but the condition itself in the main won't allow them to work out what transferable skills they have to offer another person. So again, an expert would have to be there to give them about an hour's time to work out what they are. Now, if at the moment they don't think they have any transferable skills, and if they know that their CV doesn't look quite right, that means that they have very low self-esteem. So these two pieces of work not only empower them to get out into the recruitment world and try to get a job, but it also helps them to understand a little bit more about themselves and say, yes, I am valuable to somebody else and I could get a job. So that's those two things. But there's another thing which is also impairing the autistic community, and that is, in the main, and the people who are coming to me directly, in the main, do not know that they have legal rights. the legal rights of reasonable adjustments that we've talked about previously. But even there's a problem, because an autistic individual told that they have legal rights to reasonable adjustments to make the recruitment process easier for them, or indeed their experience at work, the condition itself will make it very hard for them to articulate what solution they have to the problems they've got. So that also requires expert help to guide them on that as well. So those three elements have to be in place before they are actually at an equal level to a neurotypical. But the problem doesn't end there, because that's just the autistic community. What about the neurotypical community, the business world? Very often, they can't spot an autistic individual coming through the process if that person doesn't tell them that they're autistic. So we've got another problem on the other side of what could be offered to these individuals. And that's why we've got to work with both sides, and we've got to get that communication piece right. So that's, I think, is the flavor of what I think the problem is for the autistic community.
Yeah, I think there's some parallels with other people we've been speaking to, either with a disability or have come from a different community. There's that joining and synergy and understanding individuals, absolutely.
Can I just on that point, I think the autistic community as individuals find it much harder to articulate that they have the problem and prepare to share it, whereas other communities are more likely to say, yes, I've got dyscalculia or dyspraxia. So I just put that in.
Sure. Tony, can I come across to you, because I know you've had your hand up for a while, maybe on linked to a previous point, but yeah, please, can I come across to you?
Yeah, thank you. I guess it ties in with a lot of stuff that's been said, and if I think about my own experience going into the workplace as a young person 30 years ago, and the experience that family members who are neurodivergent and colleagues and people that I work with, is I just wish that early on in my career somebody could have explained the unwritten rules to me. I didn't know, because of my own, brain different to Gillian's term I'm stealing, that I just wish that I'd known that. And I think that now, working as an inclusive hiring expert and a DEI consultant, I'm very conscious of ensuring that the employing organisations that I work with not only get their recruitment practice right, but they get their onboarding practice right. And I think that, that starts by ensuring that we get over the fact that there's limited discussion around individual needs when first settling new hires into organisations. We need to ensure that every new starter has a really thorough and structured discussion about their functional, their emotional and their social needs when they go into the workplace. We need to encourage individuals to ask what they need, to what Gabriel was saying there, and also to establish a culture of self-advocacy. We want everyone to be able to feel that they can ask for what they need. I think it's really important to ask people to invite people to have a tour of where they're going to be working, a really structured tour of the environment, including key areas of the buildings, breakout rooms, available tools, their own individual workspace. These are really key tips, I think, for ensuring that the onboarding of a neurodivergent individual goes as smoothly as possible. We really need to be offering functional support to people as well, whether that's actually helping somebody set up reminder alerts for deadlines, or making sure that people can bring someone up to speed for a meeting that they might have missed because they're working on another task. Those are the types of adjustments that are crucial, not just the physical, environmental, accessible adjustments. It's about those other kind of adjustments that will help people ensure that in the workplace they're able to stay on top of their workload, and all of the social conversations that go on that then feed into workplace decision making. And I think that it's really important as well to ensure that new recruits are given the chance to meet colleagues individually or in small groups, rather than having to be introduced at a company meeting or Friday drinks or something like that. Those types of social norms don't work for everybody. And in fact, when it comes to social norms, offering to make a cup of tea or organising a birthday cake for colleagues, those types of things need to be explained to people as well. I remember my first job going off and just was told that's where the kitchen is. I'd go and make myself a cup of tea, and people thought I was being rude. but I didn't know that it was a social norm in the workplace to offer everyone in your bank of desks a cup of tea. So, you know, those types of things have to be considered for everyone. So look beyond the accessibility, look beyond the environment, and actually think about those emotional, functional and social needs for people too.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you, Tony. And I think I'm really conscious, like I said at the beginning, we can talk forever. You can see the passion in everybody on this call. And I'm conscious we've got literally 4 minutes now, because people obviously were, you know, dying, got other things in their diaries. But I would really like to hear your number one must do, top tip, words of wisdom, whatever it might be. And if we can go round everybody and make sure that, you know, we've got these 4 minutes to do that. So it's a bit of a whistle stop tour. And if you've got others, then send them in the chat, send them on to us and we'll share it. But Rebecca, could I come across to you for your number one tip?
Yeah, so I think knowing your strengths in the team and the weaknesses and being able to put them at the best advantage. And I think, yeah, just making sure that you're aware of all the strengths in your team.
Super, thank you. Gillian, I know you have a few that you'll share. We'll make sure they go out, but what's the number one thing?
Yes, I think it is around that. It's listening. It's around involving the users, carrying out pilot studies, simulations, prototypes. It's also about being aware of unconscious bias. So yeah, listening and team and understanding.
Super, thank you. Sharon, may I come to you?
So remember, one size doesn't fit all. Speak to your team members and you know, have that flexibility to adjust as needs be to bring out the strengths of everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Richard?
Yeah, for me, I think understand the tools available to you. So I know there's a lot of software programs and sort of websites like Grammarly be really useful if you have certain things where you struggle to sort of formation of sentences or paragraphs or report writing. So just know what's there and use it for your strengths.
Thank you. Gabriel, have you got a tip to share?
I think the word is empathy. A lot of neurotypicals don't think that the autistic communities have any empathy. I think it's completely misunderstood. They just empathize in a different way. And I think we've got to start to think about the autistic individual and what they bring to work. But I also think we need to empathize with colleagues who may have autistic children and bring to work so lots of stresses which are completely hidden as well. So I think this is a much bigger issue that we need to talk about.
Super, thank you. Tony, do you have one last point that you want to express?
Yeah, just don't make assumptions, ever.
Super. And Laurel, finally, is there any piece that you would like people to take away as advice? I just need to pop you off mute. Oh.
That's good advice. Always don't come on mute when you're on the Zoom call. Still on mute. Shall we do some letter reading?
No, it's all right.
There we go.
I've heard recently something that even I didn't know with all the autistic people I've been speaking to. Never ask an autistic person, like, what time will you be home or where are you going or anything like that, because the answer will be, why do you want to know? And you don't always know why you want to know, because you don't actually, it's just something you say, but it can be very frustrating. So these are just very simple things. And also autistic people hate late changes in an agenda or a timetable, and it can make them very, very anxious. So this is something people should be aware of.
Yeah, thank you. I think my final one with the HR hat on is, it's not a HR thing. It's a business thing, it's a people thing, it's a community thing. So when you are sitting in a business, writing the strategies and thinking about the policies, consult with everyone, don't just leave it in the remit of HR. That would be my piece to contribute. So sadly, we're bang on 1 o'clock, so we are out of time, and it's been an absolute pleasure to host Alternative Thinking today. The questions, there's been a couple of questions, there's been lots of other pieces of feedback in the chat that we will share with people. We will make sure that the links to maybe the support pieces that Richard has mentioned, for example, we've got a list out of, you know, anything that we think will be useful to help you in a business or you as an individual sitting there maybe struggling a little bit at work. We'll do what we can to get those resources out to you. So the recording of today's session will also be made available in the coming days from our website, and our website at ACE does also have a number of other useful pieces of information. So please get in touch. The panelists are all around as well. We will share their contact details. So if you have got a question, you think somebody could help you in your business or as an individual a little bit more, then please feel free to reach out directly to anyone on the call. So finally, thank you again to our panelists. You've been fantastic. Thank you again. And thank you to everybody on the call. It's been great hosting Alternative Thinking. So thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Take care. Bye-bye.